Hello and welcome to Becoming a Berean. I am Ro and I'm super excited to have you with me today. Today I'm going to do something a little bit different. I think I have a little bit of a word for you off of a word that I once taught. So in the last few weeks, I keep hearing the story of Michal being brought up, one of David's wives. And as usual, it's the way that it is brought up is a way that really dishonors her, which makes her out to be David's barren and bitter wife, and esteems David for his act of worship that we may be familiar with in 2 Samuel 6, when David is bringing the Ark of the Covenant back into the city and he begins to dance in a way that his clothes come off. And we see this woman in the window, the wife of David, that most people associate with the bitter woman who leaves barren and never has children with David. And so I keep hearing this story talked about lately, and I kept feeling the Lord to take me, urging me to go back and look at this message. And so I tried to find my message. I couldn't find it to just put back out there, but I think it was because the Lord wanted me to end it differently today. So if you will join me, Berean, so if you've not done becoming a Berean with us, my heart is really to get you in the Word, just to get you in the Word, to study, to dig, to let the Word speak to you. We'll talk today about letting the Word teach you or show you, not just tell you, because a lot of times we'll just read the words on the page and not really take in what is he showing us here, what's happening here. And you'll see as we end today why I took you back to this message. But so I want to introduce you to Michal, because most of us know her from 2 Samuel 6, where she's in this window and she's looking on him with disdain, like this half-dressed man dancing before slave girls, and her heart is just hardened before David. But I want to back up, and I think it's so important that we care about what leads people to a window scene like this. Like, we don't judge someone and write them off because of one snapshot of their life. We have a woman in a window in a moment that defines her for the rest of her life. As far as we know, we don't hear anything else about Michal other than she never had children with David. And so, so important that we are not labeling, defining, getting people stuck, or even ourselves stuck in one season of life that maybe even was crushing and painful, and letting it define us and mark us for our legacy. And so I want to take you back in scripture today, and I want to tell you the story of this woman that was in that window, because I think her story matters, and I think it speaks to what God's doing in us in this season. So if you go back to 1 Samuel, and you can get there, 1 Samuel 14 in verse 49, I believe this is the first time we see Michal. We learn from 1 Samuel 15:49 that she is a child of Saul's, King Saul. She's actually the youngest daughter of King Saul. And so we just get a glimpse there of who she is. And then if you move to 1 Samuel 18, we're getting the scene of David coming into this royal family. So Goliath has been threatening the people of God, and everybody's afraid of Goliath. And then all of a sudden, this shepherd boy comes out. We know the story of David and Goliath with his sling and his rocks, and he takes out Goliath. And when you get to 1 Samuel 18, you see this scene that David and Jonathan meet, and Jonathan is Saul's son, and they are instantly connected in spirit. So 1 Samuel 18:1 says that they became one in spirit. So they had this like deep connection that's going to spur jealousy in Saul. But if you keep reading, you see that as he enters the city, people are dancing and singing. They are, according to verse 6, that as he comes in, the women are coming out of the towns of Israel to meet King Saul, and they are singing and dancing with joyful songs and with tambourines and lutes. And they're saying, this is David is with Saul, they're saying Saul has slain his thousands and David his tens of thousands. So as you can imagine, the jealous Saul grew even more envious of David. It even says in verse 9, and from that time on, Saul kept a jealous eye on David. So we've got this shepherd boy, warrior king coming in, and the crowds are loving him. His son Jonathan loves him. And then he finds out that Michal loves him too. So basically, because he killed Goliath, David is supposed to get the first daughter of Saul, and Saul sneakily sends her off to another man to be married. And so now he realizes and uncovers in verse 20 that Michal loves David. It says that now Saul's daughter Michal was in love with David. And when they told Saul about it, he was pleased. So he's thinking, I can bait David with Michal. Like, I will bait him in. And so he's going to make this request. If you want to marry my other daughter, and you've killed Goliath, but now if you'll go get 100 Philistine foreskins. And so he really thought, there's no way he'll come out of this. Like, if he comes out of the Philistines with 100 Philistine foreskins, there's just no way. And so, but I want to take you back to that text, 1 Samuel 18:20. It says that Michal was in love with David. And when they told Saul about it, he was pleased. So he's pleased right now. But I want you to go back. So the scripture tells us that they told Saul. But I want you to put some humanity on this, because we're trying to get this woman's story and what led her to that window. And when I preached this message, the first time I did it, I was talking about my daughter, Holland, and how when she was a young teenage girl, Justin Bieber was very popular, and she loved Justin Bieber. And we all knew she loved Justin Bieber. If you were in our house, that child loved Justin Bieber. I had a friend that had like a movie theater kind of thing in their house, and we projected the Justin Bieber movie on the wall, and she was standing up there dancing as if she were with him. Like, I hope she does not watch this, but she loved Justin Bieber, but we all knew it. And so putting some humanity on this, you're in a palace, okay? This is the King Saul. This is his young daughter that they're tending to, and word gets back to Saul that she loves David. So you can imagine that young love. I mean, oh my gosh, he's the warrior coming into the kingdom, right? And so this is her first love. Oh my gosh, to marry David for the young Michal, this is like a dream for this little princess. And so if you go down, he actually comes back with not 100 Philistine foreskins, but 200 to take Michal as his wife, okay? And I want to say this is I'm a freedom ministry kind of person. I think this says something that David never really felt like he was fit for royal family because of his own wounding. And we know this because when Jesse was calling in his sons, because it was prophesied that the king would come from Jesse's home, he didn't even call David in. Like, David was left in the field. Like, well, it couldn't be you. And so here we have David still trying to prove himself. Like, no, you want 100? I will get 200 Philistines foreskins because I'm going to prove that I'm worthy, right? And so what happens now, obviously, he gives Michal to David. And then we see in verse 28, it says, when Saul realized that the Lord was with David and that his daughter Michal loved David, Saul became more afraid and remained his enemy the rest of his days. In some translations, it says, when Saul saw that the Lord was with David and saw that Michal loved him. And so I'm trying to put some humanity back on the story. Like, so Saul is seeing this. So Michal wasn't just like marrying, betrothed off to David. She loved him in a way that it was visible. Okay, so people looking into their life could say, that woman loves that man. I mean, have you seen someone and you thought, that woman loves that man, right? This is the picture we have. And so you keep going to 1 Samuel 19. What happens next is that now Saul is feeling very threatened. So the Lord is with him. Jonathan loves him. Michal loves him. The people love him. I have to take him out. So we see in verse 11 of 1 Samuel 19, if you're following with me, that Saul sent men to David's house to watch him and kill him in the morning. And Michal hears of this, and she warns him, if you do not run from your life tonight, tomorrow you're going to be killed. And so Michal, not only did she warn him, she helped him escape. She let David down through a window, and he fled and escaped. Then Michal took an idol, put it in the bed, and when Saul sent word for her, sent the men to capture David, Michal said he's ill. And so she totally covers for him. She totally lets him escape. And here we go again, like the love that Michal had for David, that she's saying, I would rather lose you and you live than you die here with me. I mean, that's love. I mean, that is like deep love that she's able to say, I would rather lose you than you try to live and die here with me. And so she risked her life in essence, because they could have done anything they wanted to with Michal in that culture. And yet ends up being released to another man, not like in a royal way, more like a banishment from the kingdom. She's sent off to Michal as his wife. And so now, when I was teaching this, I kind of got all into this story and like, what would it have been like for her? Like, how many days do you think she went to the window? I got a window behind me. Like, how many days do you think she went to the window and was like, did he love me? Would he come back for me? Like, I loved him enough to risk my life. How many nights did she go to bed like crying for him, like the love of her life is gone and she doesn't know if she'll ever see him again, and she's waiting and she's hoping she mattered enough that he shows up on the white horse ride and says, I'm not leaving without you, right? I mean, put humanity on this story. I mean, think of the brokenness of her heart to love this man and then get this man and then the man be taken from her, right? And so we don't really hear about Michal. We hear about David. So David comes out of hiding. We see this at the end of 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel. David is conquering again. Not only is he conquering, he's conquering women. Like, he's got wives. He's got 6 children. And then all of a sudden, we hear that he's calling for Michal. So if you go to 2 Samuel 3, you can see the lineage that he's already creating. So we know Michal has been sent off to Patal, her new husband, and then he has gained land and gained women, and now they're trying to reunite the kingdom, and he decides to call for Michal. So if you go to 2 Samuel 3, in verse 13, he begins to say, get Michal, like, don't come back without her, because for him to be king, she would make him the legitimate heir. He would be the husband of Saul's daughter, so he would be a legitimate heir. And so here we get this word, they're sending for Michal to bring her back into the kingdom at David's request. And if you go down to 15, it tells her that she was taken from her husband, Patal, son of Lesh. Her husband, however, went with her, weeping behind her all the way until Abner stops him and says, go home. So I want you to get this picture. I'm surely brokenhearted. We can all attest to this, for her great love being taken. He doesn't return for her. She's sent off to another man, and I don't know, but we can imagine, because David was so known in the kingdom and celebrated, that the word probably got back that he's taking on these women and these wives, and here she is with her husband, and she decides to make a life of what she has. And there had to have been love there for her husband to run behind the carriage weeping, like, bring me back my wife. I wonder what he said. Bring me back my wife. No, Michal, I love her. Like what she hoped David would do, this other man is doing. Like, I want you. I don't want you to leave. I'm willing to chase for you. And obviously in the culture too, there was a sense of authority. So when Abner says, go home, he has to turn around and leave. And so this is the picture of Michal before we see her in 2 Samuel 6, when she's in the window and David's bringing the ark back up into the city and he's dancing. And now she has this reputation of being this bitter woman, because in essence, we take a snapshot of her life from 2 Samuel 6 in verses 20. When David returned home to bless his household, Michal, the daughter of Saul, came to meet him. And she says, how the king of Israel has distinguished himself today, disrobing in the sight of slave girls, of his servants, as any vulgar fellow would do. And David says to Michal, it was before the Lord who's chose me rather than your father or anyone else in this house, when he appointed me as ruler of the Lord's people of Israel, I will celebrate before the Lord. I will become even more undignified than this. Now, I want you to hear me. I'm not saying that David wasn't worshiping the Lord and that God is not calling us to worship unashamed. He is. He is. He is saying, I want your worship. But this story has been taught so much about a woman who gets a snapshot of her life, and she's the bitter woman who was against worship. And I don't think that's her story. I think she was a broken-hearted woman who wanted this man she's looking at disrobing in front of the people in the city as he's dancing. She's wanting him to come after her for many, many years. And now he's taken from her chance at love and put her in a place full of other women, right? I mean, it wasn't to me about the worship as much as it was a heart of a broken-hearted woman. And so I say this to you because, one, I wanted to redeem her name, because I think very few people know Michal's story about this young woman who was in love and who saved his life and then was left, basically. But I want to say this. I think it's really important. I think there's a couple of reasons. One main reason why I'm sharing this with you today, but one is that we've got to be careful not to make judgments about people based on a snapshot of their life. And a lot of times a snapshot is a place of pain. We see a place of pain or a response to pain, and it defines someone's life in our eyes, and we judge them based off of that one incident. And I think it's so important that we get to know people's stories and to know what led them. And as people who are called to reconcile people back to God, it matters that we care about people and their stories. And at the same token, I want to say this to you, that you cannot define your life out of a snapshot of pain. You cannot define your life and limit your life out of one moment of crisis or one moment of deep pain and just say, now I'm disqualified, or now God can't use me, or now I've got baggage, or now there's too much pain, or now I'm not redeemable. And so that's the second part of this. But I think, to me, what I feel like God wanted me to share this with you today, and possibly the reason why I couldn't find the original video, is because it ends differently today. I think we're in a season, and many of you are feeling it, where God is doing deep work in our soul. Like, God is really digging deep, and he's exposing, her bitterness. She was bitter. Was it valid? Absolutely. It was valid. We all would be probably bitter and under those circumstances. The problem is giving that bitterness back to God so that God can birth some things in us. And we see Michal was never called to David, obviously, or it says that she was barren, that she didn't have children. And so we know that defining moment in her life shaped her legacy. It just shaped her legacy. And I think God is notorious for using the broken and the bruised and the pain of our lives to bring beauty from ashes, right? And we're just in a season where I believe God is saying there's some things in your life that have been painful, and they've been hard, and they've left you barren. And he is wanting today to bring back up those things, and he's wanting to breathe life into those areas of your life. I really believe that we're in a season, and I keep saying this word, excavation. That seems to be the word that resonates most with me. It's like I'm excavating everything in you that hinders love, that hinders me and you connecting, that hinders your truest identity. And if you're willing to go there with me, you will find yourself hidden in me. You will find who you are in me, not in the world, not in the labels, not in the woundings, but you will find who you are in me. And some of it's painful because you have to admit, I'm broken and bitter, or I'm rejected, or I've experienced betrayal, or I have unforgiveness. And so all of these things may be valid for our lives, but we are in a season where God is looking for vessels that are willing to just excavate out the deepest, darkest places and letting his spirit begin to reign there. I know I've taught freedom ministry, and I love teaching freedom ministry. And one of the things we would say is whatever you focus on begins to order your life. And he wants the Spirit of God to order our life. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. He wants the Spirit of God to order your life, not anxiety, not your past, not your pain, not what's missing or lacking. He wants the Spirit of God. That's why he says, seek first the kingdom, and everything else will be added. If you just seek first the kingdom, it will resolve some of these other things in your life. But can you seek first the kingdom, right? Can you let me order your life? And I think for some of us, our pain has ordered our life for far too long. Our lack has ordered our life for too long. Our disappointment has underlyingly disordered our life for far too long. And he is saying, will you let me in today? Will you let me in this season? Will you let me into those places and let me breathe life? Let me bring beauty from your ashes. And let me tell you what, girls, if I can let him in, you can let him in. We are on this journey together. I'm not saying this as someone who's figured this out. I am saying this as a woman in process right now. I am in process. And he's saying to Rochelle, you can bury all this pain and you can let it keep you stuck, or you can keep surrendering it to me, and I can make a well-watered garden out of all that dirt. A well-watered garden, and then you can be a restorer of streets and dwellings as I've called you to. So I just encourage you today, ladies. I want to, as we close, just take a moment and I want you just to take a moment, put your hands on your heart, close your eyes, and I just want you to ask the Lord, is there a place in my life that I have allowed to go barren? Is there a place that you want to rebirth, that you want to breathe the ruach of God on right now in my life? Is there a place? And if so, God, help me be brave enough and vulnerable enough and courageous enough to invite you in to that place, like to invite him in. God, that you would come into these deep, dark places, Lord, these places of disappointment where we just buried our dreams and our hopes, Lord, that you would come in right now and that you would begin to revive, awaken, restore, breathe on all of these dead places. God, that you would bring us back to life in a completely different way, Lord, that we wouldn't even look the same. That's our prayer, that we would not look the same, that we would be so changed. That we would be so changed. And I remind you, ladies, it is only friction that births a pearl. It's only friction. And so our lives become even more precious with friction, even more precious. And so your friction has not halted you. It's made you precious. So I love you, ladies, and I hope to see you back next week. Be blessed.